All right, we're going to call to order the emergency meeting of the Waxhaw Board of Commissioners for October 15th, 2019. We have one item on the agenda, interview some of the executive search firm RFP finalists, and then towards the end of the meeting, provide further instruction to staff. This is a meeting that's an emergency because of the time frame that we were constrained by in terms of public meeting announcements, and so therefore it was communicated that way. I'll entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, with this first firm up is Developmental Associates and Stephen Straus. And so I think we can see everything about you out there. So Stephen, thank you so much for joining us. We really do appreciate and thank you for responding to the RFP. The way we'd like to do this is we'll give you 10 to 15 minutes to kind of talk us through your organization. We'll have some questions for you, and we'll try to wrap it up within 45 to 55 minutes, if that's okay with you. So,
okay.
Let me just go around the room. Mayor Steve Maher, Commissioner Candace DeFinis, Commissioner Kat Lee, Mayor Pro Tem Brenda McMillan, Commissioner Tracy Westlake, and Commissioner Brenda Burns. And so, thank you, and we'll let you take it away.
Good morning to all of you. Hope you're doing well. You asked me to begin by talking a little bit about our firm. Let me start off just briefly about myself. I'm a native North Carolinian. I grew up in Western North Carolina. I've worked in North Carolina all my life. And our firm is the only one in North Carolina that is North Carolina based. And but at the same time conducts a number of searches on an annual basis. I got my start at the School of Government at UNC Chapel Hill, where I worked there for 3 or 4 years. Taught in the Masters of Public Administration program. I left there in 1990 and went to North Carolina State University. Taught in their Masters of Public Administration program and began working as a sole provider. Just to give you a little bit of a context, this tells you about our business, but also kind of our thinking as we've gotten into executive search processes. About 12, 13 years ago, I was doing a lot of work with training and also with promotional processes for police and fire departments. But I was really getting concerned about what I was seeing occur with municipalities and their hiring processes for top-level executives, for managers and police chiefs in particular. And what I saw was that firms from outside the state were coming in, and they were running what I consider to be less than best practices in terms of how they went about the hiring process for these positions. So we began launching our approach to executive selection with the town of Garner about 12 years ago. We helped them hire a really excellent manager who helped help the town make some significant transitions. And from there, we just kind of took off with our business. And we have probably filled 30 to 40 manager positions in North Carolina. We have worked with all sizes of municipalities, from very small ones in your area. Rutherford, for example, a very small community, maybe the smallest community per capita with regard to population, Mills River in the state. So we've worked with a number of very small ones. We've also worked with very large ones. We've helped the city of Charlotte hire some key executives. And we routinely work, for example, with Greensboro, Fayetteville, Cumberland County to help them hire executives. So we're very adaptable in that respect. So let me begin by talking a little bit about our approach. We are very different from a traditional search firm. We do things in a much more technological way, and we also have an approach of trying to get you the best information so you can make the best decisions. Very often search firms will try to steer candidates to you, strongly recommend certain candidates over others. Our approach is we give you the data, you make all the decisions. That's your job. Our job is to try to get you the best information to do so. If you look at our proposal starting on page 7, we lay out a step-by-step process that we use in the search approach. That begins by us spending some time in the town, getting a really good feel for what's going on in terms of the key challenges. We don't ask the traditional search firm question of what competencies are you looking for. We're much more interested in what are the challenges that are facing the community right now. With respect, and typically we hear things like externally, outside the town, in terms of its relationship with the community. We typically hear things like economic development, infrastructure development, and so forth. You may have some issues with respect to key budgetary challenges. You may have some technology challenges. You may have some staffing and morale challenges. We want to know what those are because the next manager is going to have to deal with those challenges, and we want to gear our process to address those. And as a result, we can glean what are the key competencies that are necessary for the position. We'd like to hear from you all. We'd like to hear from department directors. If there's some community members that you'd like for us to hear from, we're glad to meet with them as well. Based on that information, step 2, we develop a candidate profile, a job ad. We stay away from, again, the traditional approach of listing all the responsibilities of the position. Candidates are going to know what the responsibilities are. What they want to know is what's going on in your community. And we like to highlight that with some really nice pictures and attract candidates to taking a look at the town, giving them information about the community so they may have an interest in having their families live there and so forth. We'll put that together and then we'll begin our recruitment of candidates. We use essentially 5 different methods to recruit candidates for the position. Again, I don't want to leap to any assumptions, but very often smaller communities are interested in having someone from North Carolina as a candidate for the position. That's not necessarily the case, but it may be. So if that's the case, we'll focus our search mostly on North Carolina, but we'll also expand to the region and can also do so nationally as well. The methods we use are we obviously will post the job ad on key professional websites, obviously the League of Municipalities, the North Carolina City and County Managers Association, International City Managers Association. We also have some listings for some associations that focus on women or minorities, and we love to target those as well. We have an excellent track record with regard to hiring women and minorities for key executive positions. We also will use some listservs that we're involved with. The School of Government has an extensive listserv, for example. We use social media or LinkedIn to attract the more tech-savvy candidates for the position. And most importantly, we will target individuals that we think would be great candidates for the position. We typically we have several retired city and county managers that work with us. We typically give them the responsibility for that targeted recruitment. And we also have an extensive list of candidates that have been successful in our processes that we want to attract as well. Last of all, we will have all the candidates apply we'll develop an application. We'll have all the candidates apply using a system that's called NeoGov. It's the largest source of government jobs in the country. By using that system, we also get the word out as a recruitment method. But what I think is really important for you all as council members is the traditional search firm will hand off to you a number of resumes and cover letters. You're going to have a devil of a time sorting through those because they're all done differently. Some candidates will base their resume on chronologically, from the beginning of their career to where they are now. Others will base their resumes on their accomplishments. And frankly, we have found that a number of candidates that are sound candidates really don't know how to put an attractive and effective resume together. And so as a result, you're going to be fumbling through those, trying to figure out which ones really meet what you're looking for. What we do to reduce that confusion is we set up an application. All the candidates would apply online, completing the application. Certainly they can submit their cover letter and their resume. But this way we get the same information from all the candidates, and then you can compare apples to apples as opposed to trying to figure out how this resume matches with another. So on the next page, conducting the initial screen on page 8, what we will do is we will go through and screen each application that we receive. I will just tell you, I would be surprised if we didn't get at least 40 to 50. I believe in under-promising and over-delivering, but I would be very surprised if we didn't get at least 40 applicants for the position. And we'll go through and we'll score each one of them, but listen very carefully to what I say when I use the term score. What we're doing is we're assessing how well they fit the criteria that we've developed with you, again, in these initial job analysis and focus groups where we meet with you. So we're not saying that, candidate number 1 is your best candidate, because as you will see, there's a lot more information to be gathered. At this point, it's basically a paper screen, and we help you by doing the analysis of how well they fit. We also will do a Google search on all the candidates, and we will provide you with a spreadsheet in addition to the resumes, cover letters, and applications. And you will see how we've scored each of the applications on those spreadsheets, and we will provide the links to any of the Google search results, so you can actually go in and read those articles yourselves if you'd like to dig that deeply. We'll give you a little summary of what the articles say, but again, you can read them firsthand if you'd like. We send that to you about a couple of days before our first screening meeting with you, and that first screening meeting takes place about 35 days after we begin the process. We then meet with you, and we go through all those applications, and we very often find that candidates that are ranked a little bit higher, there may be some information in their background or in the Google search that causes the board to drop them. But again, all of those decisions remain with you. And so you come up with your final list of candidates, up to 15, that then go through the secondary screening process, which is step 5 in again on page 8. Now, I actually would argue that what we do in our secondary screen is more advanced than what most boards do when they hire a manager for the position. And let me explain the 3 steps that we use. First of all, with those 15 applications, we will conduct a structured telephone interview with each of the candidates. Structured questions, we keep a narrative on everything that they say. We actually even have a structured scoring system, so you're not just getting subjective assessment of the candidates, you're getting objective assessment. Secondly, we will have the candidates complete short essays that we send to them electronically. These typically focus on how they've gone about key accomplishments during their careers. And last of all, we then ask all the candidates to take the emotional intelligence inventory, which is described for you on page 11. This is an inventory that's validated for employment. It's a psychological. It provides you with in-depth information that you would be trying to glean otherwise, typically through interviews in a very subjective and often inaccurate way. But we give you this information based on, again, a validated instrument that looks at key factors like their self-confidence or self-regard, how goal-oriented they are in their careers, self-actualization. Can they think and act independently? Are they capable of resolving conflicts collaboratively, assertiveness? The interpersonal realm looks at interpersonal relationships. Are they going to be a manager who's going to get out and engage with folks, or are they going to be one who tends to sit behind their desk? Are they a team player? Do they have social responsibility? With regard to decision making, impulse control is critical. Do they get data before they impulsively make a decision? Do they work through problems objectively? Are they, again, under stress management? Are they adaptable? And do they have an optimistic or can-do attitude when they're dealing with key challenges? We will have all that information for you at the end of the secondary screen. And, very important for you to know, we would have a different person on our staff conducting each of those methods. The reason for that is, of course, all of you have interviewed candidates before. You know that once you become positive about a candidate, that can bleed over into your assessment using other methods of other methods of assessing the candidate. And so what we want to have is a firewall between each of these methods. So you're getting 3 objective perspectives from 3 different folks on the results of each of these methods. We again pull all that information together. We provide it back to you during our secondary screening meeting. I forgot to mention this, but the first screen and the second screen are both closed sessions because you're dealing with personnel information. We, again, go over that information with you, ask you to reduce the number of candidates down to no more than 6. Those folks then get invited to come to Waxhaw to go through what's called an assessment center process. That's described for you, actually 6, 7, and 8. All those steps talk about that process. Let me begin by discussing step 6, where we design the hiring process. So, as you will see, we are believers in interviews. You would get screening interview information based on interviews. We, at the end of the process, you as a council, as commissioners, are going to want to interview the final top candidates. But the typical search process is totally interview driven. We screen candidates through an interview, we bring them to the town, we interview them again, we might have different folks interviewing them and so forth. Interview. Very important for you to understand that interviews are a very limited tool for assessing candidates for a critical position like town manager. And let me explain why that's the case. When you interview candidates for a position, you can really only learn about 3 competency sets that they have. Essentially, when you interview candidates, you find out what their talk, what they say, but you do not see them in action. And as a result, interviews are subject to a lot of subjectivity and a lot of error. What you can learn from an interview are 3 things. One is the candidate answers questions. You can observe their oral communication skills. Secondly, you can find out what they know, and that can be important. Understanding what they know about planning, budgeting, North Carolina law, if that's important to you as well. And third, you can assess their judgment. So, for example, one of the key competencies that we know your manager is going to need to have is how well they can manage staff or other department heads. You might want to ask a situational question, such as, if you had a situation with a department director whose performance isn't what it needs to be, get a little bit more information, how would you go about dealing with that? And the answer to that question, you assess their judgment about how they would deal with that person, their knowledge about how to manage performance, and their oral communication skills. Here's what you don't know at the end of an interview. Do they actually have effective conflict resolution skills to work out that issue with that individual? You don't know that. Are they actually a good listener, and do they actually work collaboratively and hold people accountable? You don't know that. All you know is what they said they would do. You haven't seen those competencies. So here's another set of competencies you don't know about at the end of an interview. You may know their budget experience, but you don't know how effective they are at budgeting. You don't know how well they can make a presentation. You certainly don't know how well they can write, put together a plan, and organize and delegate responsibilities. So to get a direct view of those kinds of competencies, we design assessment centers. An assessment center is essentially, again, based on what we learned about your organization, we will design exercises that simulate the key challenges that the manager will have to carry out. I am confident that one of those would be a budget presentation where we would actually give them the town budget. Based on what we've learned, we would share with them, here's a key challenge that the town is dealing with respect to the budget. We would have them analyze that and make a presentation to folks acting as commissioners. And we would again see their presentation, their budget analysis skills, and the depth of their understanding as we ask them follow-up questions after their presentation. That example I gave you of how well would they deal with the department director, we would actually set up what we call a coaching role-play exercise, where we actually would give them information about a fictional department director, and they would actually have to sit down with someone and work through those issues face-to-face with that person, so we can directly observe those competencies such as conflict resolution, problem-solving, interpersonal skills, supervisory and leadership skills. We very typically give the candidate some sort of a written assignment, It could be, for example, one we've done in the past for a couple of communities is here's some of the economic development challenges facing the community. Put together your plan for how you're going to go about, put together your process for how you're going to go about developing a plan for that economic development initiative. And then last of all, we very often have something like a simulated meeting where they might be meeting with staff members to deal with some organizational issues and so forth, or to implement new technology, and we see how well they can interact with the staff as a team. So the way we carry that out is we will work with you to identify who the assessors are. And that's step number 7. And so typically what we do is we recruit assessors from the region that are already managers or assistant managers in larger jurisdictions. We would also encourage you, if you'd like, to include some community members. We typically get about 13 to 14 folks together. All of them sign statements of confidentiality. All of them spend this is a 2-day process. The morning of the first day, we devote entirely to training to make sure that those folks know how to use our system. And one of the key things that we train them on is objective analysis of the candidates. So we teach them on how to use behavioral-based methods. And this is important because this is the input that you're going to get back from them. You're not going to get opinions. You would get firsthand information about what the candidates did or did not do in each of these exercises. So you get direct, unfiltered information back from these assessors. If you want to use some community members, we're glad to do that too. Again, it's a 2-day commitment, and we would work that out with you up front. So the candidates then start coming in over that 2-day period, and we can assess up to 6 over the day and a half, essentially. On the second day, around lunchtime, you as a board would come in, call an executive session, and then we have these teams come in one by one and share with you what they've learned about the candidates. We actually put it all together for you with an electronic file that provides you, here are all the things that the candidates did that were effective, here are all the things that the candidate did on this respective exercise that were less effective. You hear that from that team, and then they leave. And the reason we do it that way is because no assessor knows all the results. All they know are the results for their exercise and for their team. So by the end of the afternoon, we complete that with all 4 teams meeting with you and sharing their results. Now, anytime you're assessing a candidate for any position at all, you're always looking for 2 sets of competencies. One, technical competency, such as ability to write, ability to make a presentation, ability to analyze a budget, ability to put together a strategic plan. But you're also looking for emotional intelligence competencies. Can they deal with conflict? Can they listen? Do they engage effectively with other people? You're going to get feedback on both sets of competencies in the assessment center. And when that's all done, we will then pull out the results of the emotional intelligence inventory, and we will cross-validate what you heard in the assessment center with what the emotional intelligence inventory has told you. Our goal in all this is, again, to try to give you the best information so you can make the most informed decision possible. By using these 2 validated methods, you're going to get much more accurate information than you're going to get from a traditional search firm's emphasis on interviews only. I will just tell you, again, excuse me with my academic background, but I will just give you the factual information. Research repeatedly shows that interviews, at best, will reveal about 30 to 35% of the competencies necessary for an executive position. Our approach gives you 70 to 80% of the competencies that a candidate would need to perform in an executive position like town manager. Neither approach is perfect, but the approach that I'm presenting to you all is 2 to 3 times more accurate than the traditional interview-driven approach, which is what invariably almost all other firms will be offering you. When all that's done, you'll have 2 different possibilities at the end of that debrief. One, you've got one candidate that stands so far above all the others that you want to bring him or her in. and conduct interviews. If everything's okay, you're going to want to negotiate and move forward very quickly with that individual. In other cases, and this is more likely, you'll have 2 or 3 candidates that did well in the process. You'll want to bring them in, work with you on how to orchestrate all that, bring them in for final interviews, and then make your decision among those 2 or 3 folks. We can also, if you'd like, even help you with interview questions. We will have learned an awful lot about each of these candidates based on our process. We can actually give you 2 or 3 questions that are tailored to those individuals, so you can learn a little bit more, particularly in those areas that they were not strong in. And that way you can really get much more of an intensive, tailored focus on each of the candidates. At that point, you then are going to want to give them a conditional offer of employment. Once you all have that agreement, we would then do an intensive FBI-like background investigation of the candidates before you seal the deal. Last point to mention to you all is that we have gotten so much information about these candidates that we are then able to provide a very intensive coaching session that gives them feedback on each of these exercises, that gives them the feedback on their emotional intelligence inventory, and work with them. Invariably, any candidate that we work with is going to have some areas for improvement because our approach is so thorough. We're going to learn about any weaknesses that they have, and we'll talk with them about putting together a plan for how they can improve with those weaker areas so that they can hit the ground running when they're officially beginning their duties in Waxhaw. So I know I've probably gone a little bit over my time, so let me shut up and see what kinds of questions that you all might have.
Take a deep breath and grab a sip of water. That was very, very thorough and very much appreciated. As you can imagine, we all had questions about the process because you can only glean so much through the written word in the RFP. So thank you for that. What we'll do is I'll call upon each member of the board to see if they have any clarification or follow-up questions. I'll state their name to facilitate for you, and we'll go from there. So we'll start with Mayor Pro Tem Brenda McMillan.
I need to get the questions together. We're doing follow-ups?
Yeah.
Okay.
Follow-up or any clarification questions?
Just qualification question on the assessors, where you spoke about the assessors, where you use managers or sometimes community members to do that type of assessment. Can you just elaborate on that just a little bit more for me, please? Because I have a question, probably a follow-up regarding that.
On their qualifications, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, how do you go about working with, if it's going to be managers? So we would give you names of, say, managers or community members that you would work with as assessors. Is that what you're saying? Who would do that assessment workshop?
Not exactly. I probably didn't explain that as clearly as I could have. So in your region, we're very well connected in North Carolina. We know the managers in your region. In fact, even some in not too far away in South Carolina, northwestern South Carolina. We would act, in terms of managers, if you all would like to see the list of the folks that we'd be recruiting, I'm glad to share that with you. Or what most of our clients do is they say they trust us to go ahead and recruit competent managers to help with the process. Again, we're very well networked, so we would know the key folks that are in your region. I would expect that we would be able to find all the managers, and that's probably about at least 8 or 9 from the region that are all within an hour's drive of Waxhaw. They could just come in and out for the day. Just as an example, we ran the process for the city of Concord to help them hire a manager. Again, we got managers all throughout that region for the process. And with regard to community members, that part would be up to you. We would ask you to tell us who are some key members in the community that you think might be able to devote a couple of days that you would like to have involved in the process. All you have to do is give us their names and contact information, and we're glad to reach out to them ourselves and see if they can participate for those 2 days. So, not sure I answered your question. Did that address it, or did you have anything further you wanted to clarify?
Just as a follow-up to that, when you say the managers and the key community members, do you use both, or can it be and or? So can you just use the managers from the region to do this without the community members, or can
Yes,
you?
ma'am.
You can. Okay, so it's
Yes,
not,
yes.
okay. Just wanted to follow up
Yes.
to see.
That's a decision the board makes, working with you,
Yeah,
correct?
Right.
We would want you all to make that call. We have run it both ways. So we've had just managers, and we've also had managers with a sprinkling of community members. What we like ideally, if we could have it any way we wanted it, we would have basically 2 managers for each community member. And that way you maybe have a community member on each exercise. I will also tell you that our process is so comprehensive and the training is so thorough, you will get a lot of good PR from community members after they participated in the process. Just as an example, we very often are running processes for police chiefs in large cities. Right now we're doing this with Greensboro. We've already gotten a lot of positive publicity in Greensboro with regard to how we work with community members. And but particularly when it's a really controversial position, like a big city police chief, we love to include community members in our process. And as a result, they actually come out of that being the best spokespersons for the town, because they'll really advocate for the quality of the process.
Thank you.
Commissioner Burns?
Good morning, Mr. Straus.
Good morning.
I have a, just clarification on the emotional intelligence inventory. I really like that. I think it's really important for problem-solving, teamwork, and interpersonal relations. Now, this is optional, correct? Or is this something that, is it optional for the candidate to take this test?
No, it's not. It's not optional. We would include it in the process. The option, there is a little bit of an option where if you want to have a little bit of a cost savings, we can include that only for those invited to the assessment center. But the candidates would take the instrument. Now, all that information is protected, and this may be at the root of your concern, is protected by HIPAA.
That's what I was,
Very careful with sharing the results of that.
okay, thank you. That's what I was concerned about.
Was that your question?
Yes.
We're very, very careful about sharing that information. One of the things that you would notice from us is anything that we would share electronically, the title of the email would always stay confidential. We would strongly emphasize to you that you're not allowed to share the results of that inventory with anyone. None of the assessors see that result. The board, the hiring authority, is the only group that would see that.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Wesley?
Okay, good morning, Mr. Straus.
Good morning.
My question is, so we are in the middle of an election year. The election in November, we would be seating new board members in December. 2, possibly 3 of the current board members will not be here throughout the entire process. So what are your recommendations, or how do you handle this timeline with that type of, that going on during the timeline? How would you handle that?
And at the same time, if I could ask you one question before I answer, at the same time, it sounds like you all would like to begin moving fairly expeditiously on the process. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, all right. So we had this very situation come up. We helped the city of High Point hire their current manager, Greg Demko, and the timing is very, very similar. Here's what I would recommend. That if you would work with us, we would just kick off the process as soon as we could all agree to do so. We would begin and go through the first screen and go through the secondary screen, run the assessment center, but time the assessment center so that the new board, again, that you all may, and again, this is just one possibility. There are other ways that we could arrange this. But time the assessment center so that the new board is there to hear the results. They're there for the debrief, and they can hear about each of the candidates, and then they can decide who they want to bring in for the final interview. But we could have worked through the process to get it to the point where we could narrow it down to, say, those final 6 or so, and then the new board could get the information on them. That's one approach. There, again, we could have the new board involved at any stage of the process, earlier if you'd like. Again, that would affect how we go about the timing of it. But if we would go ahead and get started now, I assume the new board would take office in January?
December 10th. December 10th.
Okay. Yeah, well, the timing then would actually be almost perfect because we would need to run the assessment center. There's no way we could do that before that date. And then they could hear that result firsthand, and then A, they have the ownership, and B, they have the data to decide when they want to bring in for the final interview.
Just as a point of clarity for you, Stephen, your timeline that you presented really showed the second level screening and beyond really would be the new board. Just in what you put in the proposal.
Right.
So you timed it intentionally or unintentionally, but you timed it such that you spanned the election, which I thought was pretty good.
Okay, well, we could work with that as well. They could be in the secondary screening process. Yeah. Again, that any variation on that is perfectly fine with us, and I do think it's very important for the new board, and it sounds like you all are quote unquote on board with that as well, which is to make sure that they have those final decisions. Obviously, they're going to have to work with the new manager, and the new manager, switch it around and look at it from the manager's perspective. He or she is going to want to make sure that they've got the blessing of the full board as well.
As a follow-up question to Commissioner Westlake, though, do you find that people hesitate to submit an application until the election is complete, which would be November 5th? So in other words, would that part of your recruitment need to elongate to be fair to the candidates?
Only if things are politically unstable.
Welcome to Waxhaw.
We've gone in a couple of cases where there was a significant amount of political turmoil. In that case, candidates are very, very guarded before they know how the election comes out. But I don't think that would be an issue for you all. I think what they're really applying now, again, a savvy candidate is going to be interested in the functioning of the board, but they're also applying to the community, and you've got a very attractive community that I think would draw a lot of interest.
Commissioner Lee?
Yes, hello, Mr. Straus. Thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you.
I just have one question about the emotional intelligence factors that you described. One of my concerns, and I'm not sure if this is the part of your process that would address it, that's what I wanted to know, is one of my concerns is a candidate's ability to understand where a personal relationship stops and a professional relationship begins, where that appropriate line is. Is that the kind of thing that your process would be able to identify in a candidate, that they have that understanding?
Yeah. There are a couple of things that the way I always frame an answer to a question similar to that is, I can tell you if they can deal with conflict for sure. I can tell you if they can analyze the budget. I can tell you if they can make a presentation. There are a couple of things that we have some data to help us with, but it's not a sure thing.
Of course.
One of them is how long the candidate will stay on the job. Can never guarantee you how long they'll stay. Whether they can draw that line between personal and professional relationships, can't promise you that I can give you that definitively.
Okay.
But I will tell you this. A, that's important to you all. That should be a part of your interview questions. And B, we can give you some data from the emotional intelligence inventory. I'm going to be a little bit guarded about that because we have a psychologist who will give you all the feedback on that. I am pretty good with emotional intelligence inventory, but I'm clearly the second team and she's the first team. But if you would raise that question with her during the debrief, she can help you to address that question. And I will just tell you a couple of key factors that are going to be important with regard to that. One is that she's able to do a little bit better than I am is to understand the correlation among these different factors. It's not just a high score versus a low score, but it's also how these different factors relate to one another that gives you a much better understanding. But a very important one of those is this social responsibility factor, which tells you whether they are thinking about the community as a whole, the organization as a whole, whether they put that first. And a candidate who's strong on social responsibility, you could predict would be much more careful about putting professional over personal relationships.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Good morning, Mr. Straus. So, in step 7, I was very fascinated. It seems very similar to an interview process I went through for my full-time job where, you know, they did have me prepare work product, they had me present to a panel, etc. So I very much am in favor of this process that you guys are going to go through where you get to see how they'll handle conflict resolution and how they'll communicate. I think it's also really good to see how their communication style is, as well as kind of what their analysis and project management skills are. So for me, the assessment, I think, is key and something that really sets the process above. But with the assessment, what has your search completion rate been through? I know you said earlier that you've placed 30 to 40, but typically if you find the right match, how does that look as far as your search completion rate and the pairing to the town?
Okay. Search completion rate and compared to, can you restate that? I'm not sure I understand that. So
Sure.
How successful the candidate's been?
Yeah, how successful have they been once they've joined the town? It seems like this is a very in-depth process. And then also in step 11, how far with the coaching aspect, you know, giving them all those tools to make them successful, is there a follow-up to that? Is there a check-in process that you guys go through?
Good. Great questions. And I'm delighted to hear you've been through a process like this. I'll be curious to find out what you do and how that process was set up. But let me just say this. We have had 3 candidates. One is actually still in the position, but I would say we've had 3 candidates that we were unhappy with their performance. 2 of them were let go after a couple of years. And I will just here the reasons for the 3 that did not work out. The first one, the candidate did something that's very rare. We had what we call a false positive in the assessment center. It's an extremely rare result, which is the candidate had all the skills to do the job, but her emotional intelligence inventory showed a lot of concerns. And we and the board decided, well, we saw great skills in the exercises. And by the way, this was about 8 or 9 years ago when we were just starting to use the emotional intelligence inventory. And we were a little uncomfortable putting too much weight on that. So we backed off and said, okay, let's just look at how they did in the assessment center. And we should have paid more attention to the emotional intelligence inventory because she had the skills, but not the motivation to use them, as we learned from the inventory. The other 2 that did not do well, I hate to say, this really riles me to this day because I started my career doing civil rights work. But one board refused to consider any of their top 3 candidates for the position, all of whom were African American. They hired the number 4 candidate, and he did not work out. Another board we work with, just the reverse. They refused to consider a white candidate. They hired African American instead, and that's has not worked out. So as long as everybody follows the data, we don't worry about the process. But when race gets involved or when we don't pay attention to the result, and again, the one where we didn't pay attention to the results, that's on us. We should have really emphasized that more. Although I'll also tell you, that community came back to us. They they liked our process so much, and we owned up. Look, this was a learning experience for us too. We gave them a reduced rate, and we ran their next process, and they've been delighted with their new manager. So those are the three that we look back on and have some regrets about. One was under our control. The other two, the board simply had their own racial biases and went on the basis of those rather than following the data.
And so with that, so you've placed 30 to 40, and you've had 3 unsuccessful, essentially. Okay. And then from a follow-up perspective, so after you give the coaching and things of that nature, what does your follow-up look like with the candidate, and then therefore the placed manager? What is your follow-up process with them?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I forgot to answer that part. We designed that, we'll work with each community based on what they would like in terms of our ongoing coaching relationship with the manager. Typically, it's, we provide one coaching session and that's it. And you may have noticed we built that into our fees.
Yes.
We insist on that because our reputation's on the line, just like your reputation's on the line when you hire a manager, and we want to do everything we can to get this person off to a great start. So we have at least that one coaching session. We've also, though, had agreements with some municipalities to have ongoing, and we can tailor that to what you think would work best. It may depend a lot on what you learn about the candidate through the assessment center as to whether we would have subsequent sessions or how frequent those sessions would be. But we definitely can do that. And the other thing that we can do also that sometimes can be helpful, we've had this happen a couple times too, is that we actually can do team building with the candidate and their key leadership members of their leadership team based on the information that we have. And then those leadership team members also can take the emotional intelligence inventory, and we can put that all together in terms of a session where we help everyone understand, all right, here are the strengths, here are the limitations of each of the members, here's how you can work together more effectively, and so forth.
Wow, that's great. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Okay, I have a question and a comment. First question is, in step 3, I think it's implied, but I just want to make sure I clarify it. You're not limiting the search to current or former managers. So for instance, a county CFO or a county development exec who might have broad county management skills, they'll be able to see the job posting, et cetera, and it's open to them as well, that kind of skill.
I'll give you an example of that. We helped the town of Holly Springs hire a manager, and he was the finance director for the city of Charlotte. So yes, absolutely.
Okay, great, thank you. I thought so, but I just wanted to clarify.
Right.
My second question, comment, and should you be selected, I think, and it ties back to Commissioner Westlick's question. We are in a transition period, and while boards operate in perpetuity, the thing that is of the highest concern here is this is highly confidential people information. And should you be selected, I think explaining and having a process that transition from old board to new board needs to be considered, because this stuff really can cause harm for candidates and for the town and for their current jobs. And I think we need to be extremely, extremely sensitive to that. We're in a highly volatile campaign season, and we don't need any of that.
Right. Well, I will just tell you that we put a lot of emphasis on that. And let me just, again, I want to be completely frank with you all. The fact that we have an assessment center and we bring in managers from the region, that opens up the potential for information leakage that you would not have with a traditional search firm. And I would actually argue that's the one downside of our process, is there is that a greater potential for the word to get out about candidates and to lose that confidentiality. But I'll also tell you this, you could not have a group of folks that are more sensitive to the importance of keeping that information confidential. And we spend a fair amount of time during our training, and we require all of them to sign confidentiality statements. We have not, I will just tell you, early on when we first started doing this, we did have a leak. We then started putting a tremendous amount of emphasis on this, including the confidentiality statements. Now, I can't promise you that I have 100% accuracy in this, but I'm unaware of any other leakages since then.
And I wouldn't expect that, but I just, because of the transition, more people could be touching, and I think just be sensitive to that. What additional information do you need from us?
I guess the only key thing that I would need to know is how, if we would receive your agreement to work with us, when would you want us to get started?
Well, we set out a request for proposals, and we're holding to it that at the board meeting on the 22nd, that's when the contract will be awarded, and so right after that, start the process. So,
we actually have a retired manager that works with us a lot, who is kind of our representative in your region, who could come in and immediately start the job analysis and focus groups with you all right off the bat. Although I would love to come myself if I can do that, and again, depending on the timing, but we would work that out with you all.
okay. Any further questions from you?
I just have one
Okay, Mayor Pro
question
Tem.
to follow up with the mayor's question regarding the recruitment and not limiting the search to current town managers. In your opening statement, you made a comment that sometimes communities or towns such as ours or in North Carolina, we may look to have someone from North Carolina. But I just want to ensure or just ask the question, that does not mean that you would be limiting it to just the search in North Carolina, that it could, based upon the board, be a regional or national search and
Not at all.
open to a diverse population as well.
Definitely both. We are real advocates for having more diversity among managers. There really just aren't enough African Americans, Hispanics, and females in these positions. My partner, Heather Lee, has actually been very engaged with women, leadership programs for women in public service, and we're very strong advocates of that. We do recruit nationally. We recently hired a candidate from Wyoming for a position, and so we are all over the country as well as in North Carolina. Again, and here's a key factor that would impact you all, and I don't know the answer to this. I'm not as deeply familiar with your organization as I would be after I did this job analysis, but what we find is, particularly for a smaller community, that if you don't have a really good bench of folks that can orient the new manager to North Carolina law and so forth, it's a big learning curve for someone from another state to come in. On the other hand, if you do have a good bench, that gives you a lot more flexibility in terms of bringing in a manager from other parts of the country and them still being able to hit the ground running. Again, that's ultimately, all of that is your decision. We don't put any priority on whether the candidate is from North Carolina or not. That's really ultimately up to you as to whether you want to include folks from far and wide as opposed to just in North Carolina. Or we'll recruit them and you'll make the decisions about it.
Okay, thank you so much.
I have one more question.
Yes,
if
ma'am.
you don't mind.
Commissioner DeFinis?
Hey there. So my question would be, how is your search team structured, and who is going to do what as far as the process is concerned? So you said you have Mr. Williams and Miss Lee. So just wanted to understand who is kind of taking what action, and is everyone on your team working with the candidates, or who's doing what during the process? So who's screening the initial applications, and then how are you guys dividing and conquering?
Okay. We each have our sandboxes. and we coordinate that really. I think we coordinate that extremely well. So, with regard to the original job analysis, again, depending upon the timing, I would want to do that myself and come to your community and meet with folks and get the data. If it doesn't work out schedule, the person that I mentioned is actually Mike Ruffin, who was the retired Durham County manager, has 30-something years of experience in local government. He lives actually in Concord and could very easily be there to do the focus groups with you all. The initial screen and the secondary screen, we have Dr. Heather Lee, who is an organizational psychologist, takes the lead on those. And we also have a customer service person on our staff, Holly Danford. The two of them do that together. And then, so you would see them as opposed to me during those two stages, although I can be available if you want me to be. What we usually find out is folks quickly realize they're the brains of the operation and I'm just the front guy. But nevertheless, I can be involved if you want me to. The assessment center process, that's definitely my bailiwick, and I would be there throughout that whole process. So we do have a team, and one of the reasons for that, by the way, is we frankly don't have anyone on our staff that can do everything that we do because there's a high level of technical skill involved in each one of these steps and a lot of detail. And frankly, there's not one of us. Heather Lee is probably the most adept at transitioning from all these different stages. But again, we want to give you the most expertise. We coordinate that very closely, but not any one person carries out the whole process for us.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
So with that, we've just about hit the 10 o'clock hour. We
Yes,
thank
sir.
you, Stephen, for your participation and willingness to meet us on such short notice. The timeline we are on, we will make a decision and approve a contract no later than the board meeting on the 22nd. That's what was stated in the RFP. And so you and others will hear from our HR director, communicate that after that decision. It's an evening meeting, so we'll let Wendy sleep in and not have her hop on that until at least 9 o'clock the next day. So expect something the 23rd. We'll let her sleep that night.
Okay. Well, she's been great to work with so far. She's been very much on top of everything. And that all sounds great to us. We'd love to work with you. Thank you again so much for allowing me to do this via Skype. I wish I could have been there in person, but I think I would have been really paying the price after being away for the last week and then coming in and having to come to Waxhaw today. I've got some things to catch up on, as you might imagine. But wish you all the best. We would love to be the firm that works with you. If we're not, we wish you all the best and hope you hire a really outstanding manager. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And with that,
Okay.
we will recess so they can change the room over and start at 10:30. RFP finalists. This one is Baker Tilly, and we are delighted to have Steve Miner here representing Baker Tilly. And Steve, what we do is you kick it off with an explanation of whatever you want to share with us, and then each will ask some questions of you, and then we'll be done. Okay.
All right. That
Should be a fun-filled hour. So without further ado, take it away.
Well, thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. I'm Steve Miner, as the mayor's indicated, and I'm sure the material indicates, with Baker Tilly. Baker Tilly is probably, or at least may not be, a name you're familiar with. Probably more familiar with our prior name, Springstead Waters, executive recruitment. We've been in executive recruitment business for a long time. Merged this year in with Baker Tilly. They're a large financial advisory firm. We had a division of our company did local government bonds out in the Midwest, and so we found a commonality there, and so we went in with them, took their name, but kept all of our former practice intact. So our executive search, human capital services in the public sector is a big part of what we do, big part of what we did, and now continues to be a big part of what we do. So we'd like to just at the outset explain what's going on with that. I am, again, out of the Richmond office, was a manager in Virginia for quite a while. Started out over on the dark side as a county attorney in a county there about 50 miles, I guess, outside of Washington, D.C., between Charlottesville and D.C. I did that for quite a while and became their manager, and so managed the rest of my career there, and converted over and started work with Springstead. A little bit about Baker Tilly, and as our logo indicates, now joined with Springstead and Umball. Umball was another Midwestern financial services firm that was brought in at the same time we were to Baker Tilly. But this is the history of what our section has been doing for really about 30-some years. We started out in the Midwest, in St. Paul, about 30-some years ago, doing human capital services. We also do a lot of pay and class work. We have done a lot of projects here in North Carolina in pay and class. We had a former relationship with the NCLM and had a very long, productive relationship there. Our pricing got a little difficult for us, so that expired, but we've not renewed it. But the bottom line is we have done a lot of projects here. I guess I counted earlier this morning, it looks like around, roughly 100 projects or so that we've done here between executive search and pay and class. And it's a very rough number, but, to give you an order of magnitude, that's about the number of times we've been down here working. Many of those, not all, but many of those coordinated out of the Richmond office where I'm located. So we have offices in a variety of places. We've got offices in, obviously in St. Paul. Baker Tilly have got offices literally associated all over the world, but they have a large office in Northern Virginia. We've got the Richmond office. We've got search offices in Texas, in Addison, Texas, outside of Dallas. We've got offices in St. Paul, as I indicated, and some other places around the country. So the bottom line is we've been doing executive search for a long time, had a lot of clients in a lot of different states. We had a lot of successful recruitments, including, as I indicated, in many here in North Carolina. I think the information we sent down indicates some of our past work, but more recently we've done Asheville. We did the city attorney and the city manager there. Orange County, North Carolina. We've done the Beach and Boone town managers, Monroe, director of finance, Davison. The names go on. Those are all located there in your packet. But just want to make the point that we are very familiar with North Carolina. We're also a winner of the NFBPA 2015 Corporate Award. That is the Black Public Administrators Organization. And so we are actually, we provide a bit of money for one of their graduates each year. So we have close relationship with them. We like to advertise with them where we can. We like to be as broad in our outreach as we possibly can and inclusive as we possibly can, and we really value our relationship with that group as well. Okay, so what sets us apart? We'll get into a little of the details about our process. It's all included in your packets, but I also want to make sure that, I go over it. You have any questions, please feel free to stop me and ask. Number one, we get it. We have a practice of hiring people out of the local government firms, service people who have been in the seat, like myself. I was a manager, well, before that a county attorney, but don't hold that against me. We've managed ourselves. We know what it's like to manage. We know what it's like to work with councils, and we've been affiliated, with other managers much of our careers. And that's important to us. We know what you're facing. Waxhaw is obviously not sitting still in the development needs that's coming here. And I drove past some very large buildings. I looked at the map online. I saw the development map, all the projects now underway inside the city limits, or town limits rather. And it's really remarkable, but also fairly common for towns of your size and located outside of an urban hub. And, it's kind of good news, bad news, right? It's good news because your economy is strong and vibrant. Bad news sometimes because it can bring, well, let's just say interested citizens. It can bring, other issues that you have to face. So it's, we know all of that. And we get it because we've been there and done it. The other thing that I think is important that we do is, this is maybe a little different from some of our competition, we call up here, we say the organization's profile match. We benchmark the competencies, work values, and management styles using an instrument that we'll actually ask you to do. And I will say this is optional, but I would certainly encourage you to consider it. It's included in the price that we've priced this project. And it's something I think that helps differentiate us. We will actually ask you to benchmark those items in an assessment that is online. It's very easy. It takes about 45 minutes for you to do individually. We'll then form a composite of that assessment about those items that as you see the job needs and requirements. And then when we get to the finalist stage, we'll ask the finalist to also fill out an assessment of their position on that item. It's by a company called TTI. It used to be Target Training International, now simply TTI out in Scottsdale, Arizona. The instrument we use is called Trimetrics DNA. It's got 3 parts. DISC, if you're familiar with DISC, right? It's a very, very well-established and reliable instrument. Is sort of at the heart of it. We also have another part called Driving Forces, which is very, very unique and interesting. And a third part is soft skills. So there'll be actually, each candidate will be measured on 25 different soft skills and benchmarked against those elements as you have put them down in the composite. Now we don't compare individual candidates to individual members. We'll form a composite of all of the folks, the commissioners, and then do a gap report. So you'll actually have that at the final stage of the process. So you'll be able to add that to the stack of things you use to choose your candidate. It's a number of other issues, obviously, that's vitally important. This is not the biggest of them, but it's certainly a good way to help differentiate and make sure that you got the right fit, because that's what it's all about, is about fit. We have another product we use that we find very helpful, and that's called HireView. And so when we say difference maker, we're talking about a virtual interview. So when we get down to the semi-finalist phase, and I'm going to go through stepwise through what our process is here in a moment, but as we go through that process, we'll screen out the candidates we don't think fit the profile, who aren't really appropriate for further consideration in our opinion. We will, at that point, we will finalize a list of semi-finalists, and we'll ask each of them to do a online HireView video. So you will actually get to approve the questions that we're asking in that, but it's very much like an interview video. It's timed. They don't know the questions in advance, very much like an interview. They sit down at a laptop or a computer with a camera and push the go button online, and the question drops down. They'll have 3 minutes to answer it. And we typically go, 3 to 5 different questions. And that helps you then. You can then individually go online and view those interviews, those HireView videos. You can score them if you wish. You don't have to, but that's optional. You can certainly do that if you like, based on the criteria that's located on the site. So that will allow you then to see all of the semifinalists in person, well, virtually, digitally, obviously, before you make your final decision. You will also have at that time all of the background information, the resume, the cover letter, candidate questionnaire, and at least a preliminary view of what we've found out about them as semifinalists. So the bottom line is that that is a great product. It's very, very useful. I think that, one of the important tasks of a town manager, or certainly in a town such as Waxhaw, is that they have to do public presentations. They have to respond sometimes extemporaneously, right, to situations as they arise. And, they have to be good at performing in that type of environment. So this is one way, a pretty good way, I think, to look at those candidates originally to see what reactions they provide to those questions. We'll help with onboarding if that's something that's needed. We don't have to do that, obviously. It's entirely up to the council, the commissioners here. But I would say, not a great number of our clients do that, but we do have that as included. And if you wish to have that, we're certainly glad to help you with that. We have a proprietary online application system. It makes it easy for candidates. I'd say right now we probably have something like, I don't know, I think it's something close to 1,500 or 2,000 applicants in that pool from, historically. So it's not all just last week that we got 1,500 applicants, but we do have a large number because we've been doing this for a long time, and we're a national firm, so we have a large footprint. And you, as you I'm sure understand, are at a point in time where you're able to attract and recruit candidates from across the spectrum of localities and states. So it's, I think, beneficial to you in that regard. So basically, that's our key elements that is part of the process. Now, that's very hard to read, but I'll take a moment and go down so you can help you better understand the process that we follow and your involvement in it, and where it's very important. Starting with step one, we develop a recruitment brochure, a pretty standard practice for any firm, and a candidate profile. Profile is so important because obviously you have certain needs. Externally, you also have certain needs internally, right? So it's not just what's going on in the environment, it's also about other strengths or weaknesses you may have inside your organization today. It really depends on what Everybody's a little unique. It depends on what your needs are. We'll work very closely with you to determine that profile, and what we do is actually come down and we'll have individual interviews with each of the members. I presume you'll be acting as a sort of a committee of the whole, or as a board to make the selection process. So that's how we would plan to do that, is meet individually, and then we'll meet with anyone else you feel that will help us better understand the town's needs, so internally or externally. So the bottom line is that's really something we'll work very closely with you on to ensure that we've got the right profile, that we fully understand what the needs as you see them and understand them. You're living this. We do this for a living, but you're here living your reality in the town right now, and so we very much need that input. From that, we'll implement an advertising and marketing strategy. The benchmark that I mentioned earlier, the TTI, is also done at that time. It's something that can be done after the ads go out, to be honest with you, but because it doesn't take that long for you to respond to that online survey. We execute the recruitment strategy, if you have one, a public input plan. That is, I've got a slide later. I'll talk more about that. I'd be glad to answer questions at any point about that. But in some places have those, some places don't. It's really entirely what the locality feels is important to them and whether it's something they'd like to do. But that is something that we've done many times in the past. We'll develop a candidate pool based on that. We'll screen and assess those candidates that we've received. At some point, we'll have a review by date. We typically leave our positions open until filled, just in case, but we'll always have a review by date, as indicated in the proposal. We will conduct initial online interviews with those candidates as we go through there and select the ones that we think fit your profile. We'll call them. We have a series of questions that we ask them to further make sure, we got the right candidates. Do they understand what the pay and the salary is? Any other special requirements we may have learned during, the initial phases of the profile development from you. So that's knowledge we will have at that point, so we can actually call them and have a good talk with them about what we know about the locality, about what we know about them, the fit that we think might exist between their background and their interest in the town's needs. So basically, at that point, we will recommend a set of semi-finalists. There's no certain set number. Typically, that's 12 to 15 in that neighborhood. We don't want to overwhelm you. You've got a lot on your plate already. You don't need to. That's why you're hiring us, in part, to screen those out. But at the same time, we don't want to just bring you a short list. So typically, we'll bring somewhere in that neighborhood, let's say maybe 10 to 15. I've had pools with 18. I've had pools with fewer, but on average, location opportunities such as this, I would expect we would have somewhere in that neighborhood. At that point, I'll come back and meet with you, sit down, we'll go over those profiles. You would of course, have that in advance, and at that point, you will also have had the opportunities to look at the online interviews. So based on that and our meeting together, you'll hopefully be able to have sufficient information to select finalists for an interview. And we'll, at that point, once you determine who you want to bring back for an in-person interview, or sometimes if they're remote, an initial interview might be by Skype, but at any rate, finalists, what we would refer to as finalists at that point, are scheduled for interviews. We'll begin full background checks at that point. We do criminal, credit, social media, obviously very important these days, and we'll verify academic achievement as they have indicated in their applications at that point. So all of that is done as we're setting up the final interviews. We put that in a packet and send it back to you. You'll have that in front of you, and we'll come back and invite the candidates in and go through the interview process. And that's entirely, many localities like to do double interviews. Sometimes they'll whittle, maybe you'll have a group of 5, you'll bring that down to 2, maybe 3. And so whatever the need is, whatever your decision is at that point. Sometimes you'll have a group and there'll be one person just stand out and you'll say, don't let this person get out of town. We want to hire them on the spot. So sometimes that can happen. Bottom line is we'll go with whatever your needs are at that point. Our proposal and our pricing isn't contingent on more or less meetings at that point. Our task at that point is to get you the candidate you want that fits in the process as you need it. And then onboarding as necessary.
So just on that calendar, since you said you'd take questions.
Sure,
You okay right
absolutely.
now?
No,
Okay.
please.
So step 1 up there, or project overview, the first step, that completes about the middle of November. And then the screening and the initial assessment is about the middle of December. So that accommodates a town that's in the middle of the election cycle, if you will.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, the length that we've put in there is our standard process. A couple of caveats. It is holiday season. And so, and some of our feedback must come back from you guys. So, in that regard, we are dependent on your being able to review the documents and get them back to us in a timely fashion. But it's actually a very good time for us right now to be doing this search, because we've got several searches going on, but I don't know if it's affiliated with the name change or what, but we're in a low cycle right now, so it's actually a really great time for us to be handling a search of this character and caliber. So I think we can stay with that schedule with no problem.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, ma'am.
During the discussion, and you were talking about developing the, I guess, the profiles, now do you meet with the board, or are we just doing an online assessment based upon what we're looking for, per se, in
Okay.
town manager?
Okay. Thank you for the question. It's really both. I will come and meet with you individually, what we call the kickoff, have individual meeting schedule. So if you're available, right? Not going to barge into your home, but the bottom line is, yes, I will meet with you and learn from you what individually your thoughts are about the needs of the position. In addition to that, we have the online component. So that's a different facet of, really, it's the fancy word for it is psychometric. Very fancy word, but it is, when you're starting to take assessments of individuals' personalities. But also, we want you're not taking the assessment. You'll be doing a benchmark survey to help us determine what you're looking for in the individual relative to those 3 areas, okay? Habits, skills, and driving forces. Those are the 3 components in that assessment. So the stuff we'll be talking about in person is more about those internal things I mentioned earlier. What are your needs internally? What are the strengths you're looking for? What are the capabilities you're looking for in the next person who leads your town? Management, what are the issues you're facing externally? Obviously, growth and development is a big part of it. Citizen interaction, you may be having space needs issues at this point. Most localities of your size and growth patterns would be looking for space issues, just office space, and other types of things, including taxes and all those other things and services that you provide. But bottom line is, yes, the short answer is 2 things.
And one more question. You said that you would come back with approximately 12 to 15 finalists, or 10 to 15 finalists to
Of course. Well, the first thing we do, once we get to the end of the process, is form a matrix. This is a pretty standard practice. At this point, we have a profile developed, so we know what we're looking for, and that will include all those elements that you've told us, because you'll sign off ultimately on that profile, right? So this is what you have collectively said we're looking for in an individual. So we'll review all of our candidates at that point, every single one, against that matrix of things. And so it's education, it's length of service, experience with this or the other, any particular skills that you're looking for, background in terms of, either education, skills, or experience, basically. So, or sometimes it's certifications, there's a variety of things that can come out and come into play. But the initial review, as you might call it, will be based on just simply that matrix. And so we'll try to find out how many we have. And it's just typical that we try to narrow it down. It's not just experience, sometimes it's the quality of the experience, it's the location someone has worked. You've got a dynamic community. Someone from a non-dynamic community that's much smaller may not be quite ready to step into this type of role. So you may have applicants that on paper are qualified in maybe their education or their interest or their vocation, perhaps not so much in experience. So we'll go through all those. We'll try very hard to cut that down to a solid group that I'll put it this way, when we deliver that group of people to you, it is our sense that any of them at that point could do the job. Now, among them, there's clearly going to be some that you'll favor, clearly some that, on further investigation after the interview process, make very clear that this candidate is better for us than that candidate by far. But still, that initial group, that initial cut that we like to call it perhaps, is made based on what we think we've seen in their resume, the phone conversation, the interview that we've had with them at that point, and also their resume and background of experience. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Commissioner Burns?
Question, what is your search completion rate, and out of that completion percentage, what percentage of placements have had long-term success?
Well, the first part's a little tricky because, well, I'll tell you it's 100% because we don't quit until we find something. So, and that's not a joke, that's the reality. I will say in terms of our completion rate, let's define it a little more succinctly as higher on first round interviews, first process interviews. We probably, 95% or above. I honestly, I don't have the number, but it's a very high percentage. It's pretty rare that we don't get a candidate in the room that our clients feel good about hiring. And if they don't feel good about hiring, we will go back out. Frankly, it's more rare in terms of a town manager or city manager where we don't just do those positions. We do have other more technical positions. And sometimes, I got one right now. I'll give you a good example. Is a medical director, a psychiatrist that I'm looking for a client in Virginia, a county mental health facility. And it's been a very, very tough search. I'll just tell you in advance. So that's one where we're about to go into a second round. That's a more typical situation where we wouldn't be able to find a suitable candidate on the first round. So, there are other factors. You may not believe this, but your ability to work collectively together on behalf of the town is a big factor in who you can attract and who you can get to sign on with you, right? So not you as individuals, but towns and boards and commissioners everywhere have the same issue. And so some of our clients sometimes have some difficulty coming to terms with who they want to hire. So the point is, there are always those instances where we've had some difficulties. We had one town, Dumfries, I'll just tell you up front, a little town up just south of D.C. on Route 95, and they've gone through a lot of managers over the years, and the last one I did for them, I told them, I said, look, they wanted someone from Virginia, and I said, we've got some great Virginia candidates. None of them have been at the town manager level. Some of them were very competent, capable people who headed very large divisions and large governments, but hadn't had the top seat. And I told them, I said, look, the word's out. This is a tough spot to come and work, because it's kind of a high turnover rate for the town manager. So, not saying that would happen here. So, but that's a factor. So, in terms of answering your question, I think it's fair to note that not all commissions are created equal when it comes to that type of issue. So, I think you all, you've had two in the last several years. One gentleman was here, a financial guy from Hickory, went back to Hickory. You just had the more recent resignation. So, most people in the profession understand this environment, the people that you're going to want to look at, I'll put it that way, understand the type of environment that you're in right now, the dynamic of growth, the dynamic of so much that goes with that, good and bad. And so they're going to be up to the challenge. So I think you'll have no problem finding a successful candidate on the first round without fail. The second part of your question was relating to our overall, I guess you could call it recidivism rate. And again, we don't have a hard number on that. It's, we have had some candidates who have not succeeded. And by the way, our measuring success is 2 years. We've got a guarantee. If for any reason this individual leaves in 2 years, whether you decide to, have them move on, or if for whatever reason they need to move on, or it's a mutual decision, whatever, doesn't matter. For 2 years, we'll come back and redo the search. So at no charge for professional fees. Now, we'll still charge expenses, but the professional fee is part of our guarantee. And we're very proud of that. We stand behind it. I've done some searches. As you might imagine, the one I just mentioned, Dumfries, was one of those. And so I had a client call me up once a year or two ago and wanted to know when the clock struck. He said, we're having some questions about this position, and so they were actually watching the clock, and that was a redo. So yes, it happens. I'm not going to say we're perfect at getting fit. We recommend, as the old saying goes, we propose and you dispose, right? You've heard that. So at the end of the day, and we respect that because, again, that's the system is where it's supposed to work. You choosing the person you're going to run your town government. It's got to be you that makes that decision. So at any rate, with that said, what we try to do is give you the full complement of tools to help assess the candidate, so you'll have as much background about them on their professional side as you can, about their individual. The psychometric is very, very, very good. Some clients have liked it so much they've done it themselves. I mean, it's a great instrument. All of our people do it. Internally in our organization, we use it. All of us use it. If we hire someone, they take that assessment because it's developmental. It's not a tool to hurt someone. It's really developmental because we're all built a little differently, right? And so, the more you understand about other people, it seems the better off you are, and they about you, of course. So I hope you don't think I'm dodging your question. I don't have hard numbers, but there are a lot of variables involved in success rate. relative to search. And, if anyone ever comes in and says they've got a perfect record, never lost anyone, I'd have some,
Not real.
I'd have some question about that. Okay, to
So-
send it to you?
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
Why don't we let you get back to your presentation, and then we'll ask more questions at the end.
No, that was great. I appreciate the opportunity. The next slide is just a little bit about public engagement. Again, I didn't see that as part of the proposal as to my recollection, so it might not be something that you feel like you want or need. There's a variety of ways to approach that. We've done that in a variety of ways. At the end of the day, our belief is you've got, obviously, it's a touchy subject, right? You want to be open and transparent, citizens, paying the freight, yada, 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 but the truth is, you're elected to govern the town, right? Bottom line. And so you have to make that final decision. But at the same time, you might, for a variety of reasons, wish to open up to some form of public input. And these are the types of things we've done. We've done interviews, private interviews with key stakeholders. We've got an online survey that we have done many times in the past. Really like it. It's not a hugely complex survey. I'm not going to sit here and tell you it's scientifically accurate. But what it will do is give you a good sense of what people are looking for and to give you a sense of what they want in terms of characteristics of their new town manager. And so it's really a good way to add, I think, some value to the process. You're going through it. Everyone in town, well, not everyone, but many in town will know, right, that you're going through this process. So you put it on your website, maybe you post a sign at the library, you put it in the paper if you want, whatever, just let people know about it. It is a self-select, go online and fill out the form. So not everyone's it's not a scientific format so that we send it out to every 10th person or whatever. But still, it'll give you some good feedback. And so that's something that we do see a lot of good things coming out of that. We'll give you a report on that. What's really nice about that, if you choose to do that, is that it's a really good tool for your new manager. When you've made the final selection, you can hand them that and say, Baker Tilly did this during the search. It's feedback and input that the commission has received. You should read it. You should know what's on people's minds because, it's, as you know, it is, things trend, right? And some are in and out of the public consciousness, other things longer term. And so this is one way to do that. There's other potential ways you can put community stakeholders in the interview. We've run second panels, advisory panels, whatever. Again, that's entirely up to the town. The further down that path you go, the harder it is to manage the process and manage expectations. At some point, you don't want to get a struggle with a group of town residents over who's going to be selected, right? You may want their input to know about the ideas and issues. Probably less valuable to you to have them weighing in on who it is that you should be hiring. I think that's probably the best way that I would put it. Then there's also receptions and other things. We do assessments. It's not on here. That's not necessarily a public engagement process, but we do assessments sometimes, not as often for town managers, but by putting people into scenarios or artificial scenarios, hopefully, where they can react and you can observe their reaction. So that's basically it for my prepared presentation.
So we will, we already started asking a few questions, but we'll go around the room and see if there's additional questions to search out. Mayor Pro Tem McMillan, do you have any additional questions?
Just looking at the process that you
Excuse me, can you turn on your mic?
Now, is that better? Okay, I'm sorry. First of all, thank you for coming
Well,
and speaking with us
my
today.
pleasure. Thank you for having us.
Just to elaborate a little more on the process and how you're going through it, I'm looking at your proposed or preliminary timeline in going through brochures and interviews and assessments and applicant screening. And as the mayor has already said, we are in an election cycle right now where there will be 3 seats within the board that, or possibly 2, that may be changed on, definitely 2, but 3 seats that will be open on the board. So giving that timeline and given the holiday season and everything that you've done, you're proposing that your process could possibly be completed by the 17th of January.
Well, if we start on the 15th of October, which is today, yesterday,
Okay,
that was, if you go back and look at that, it's not readily
Right.
apparent from reading that schedule, but up at the header, it has a start date. So
right.
that is a caveat that I would just add to that.
Okay, well, we,
so
as a board, have already, we're trying to stick to the RFP, which shows that we hopefully will be, or definitely more likely, awarding the contract on our next meeting, which will be the 22nd of October.
Okay, great.
Now, there's flexibility in this time frame that you have right here, depending on the board's needs and everything, as possibly extending or moving some things that are here.
Yeah, it's a project, right?
Okay.
And so, yeah, there's always flexibility. There's a couple of parts that really aren't that flexible. One of them is how long do we leave this open? Our standard rule of thumb is at least 30 days. You want it out there exposed for some period of time. We have many times begun to review candidates prior to the expiration because you're going to start to get candidates fairly soon after putting the ad out. So that can save us a little time. But, you know, that's just one sort of hard and fast rule that we like to recommend our clients stick with, because if you're really short-circuiting the process if you keep it shorter than the 30 days. But beyond that, you know, the interaction, getting the profile developed, I mean, our schedule is pretty open in terms of getting back down here in a meeting with you individually, to set up the profile, to learn what we need to know going into the process. So, yeah, I'm comfortable with the schedule. That's our standard schedule, and that's what we do for a living, is make these projects run. We do a lot of them and have over the time. So, you know, I just noted earlier that it's the holidays, and what can I tell you? It sometimes can be hard to schedule things during the holidays. Not on our side. You know, we're a typical corporation. We work when we need to work. But I know local government, sometimes you got a lot of activities going on. But the bottom line is, the short answer, I'll go back to my favorite phrase, we can make that work if you all are able to come with your side of it.
I do have 2 follow-up questions, but I'll let everyone ask their questions first.
Go ahead.
Continue to go? Okay. And as you are recruiting in the recruitment process, now your recruitment process, will it be just statewide, regionally, nationally, set up to the board, or how do you normally do that to get a diverse pool of applicants for the position?
Well, it's nationwide. Clearly, excuse me, we'll blame this on my wife. I think she brought the cold home first. Today, to do a proper search, there's so many electronic means available to you, and those, you know, so when we call it a nationwide search, we'll have ads in the ICMA, right, the International City County Managers Association, and that's read as the most respected and largest professional organization for public managers. And those ads are read by people from all over the world, quite literally, but certainly all over the country. We tend to go more regional with the state ads, state-level ads. And again, you'll have the final say on where we advertise, but for you, we probably want to go into, certainly North Carolina, obviously, we're going to probably want to go into maybe South Carolina, Georgia, Virginia, with the league's advertisement sites. You're in a major economic hub in the southeast region, and so lots of people out there know about you and might be interested in this position. We want to make sure that they're aware of his vacancy. And then you got the social media, online platforms, LinkedIn. Cannot begin to tell you how important LinkedIn is today. Many of you may know that. To job searchers, it's a huge tool. We rely on that. Obviously, other social media as well. But so it's national, but you're probably going to put a little more money into your outreach in your region. People who are more likely to know the area, more likely maybe to have thought about moving there. So, at the end of the day, I hope that doesn't sound evasive, but we can't put you probably wouldn't want us to put an ad in every state organization in the country, but it certainly makes sense to do state organizations in your region. That makes sense.
And another question I have is, when you talked about the background checks or, looking into the candidates, how is that done? Is that an online process that you use in order to do that, or is there a different technique that you use?
There's really two phases to that. The initial phase is at the semifinalist phase. We have a paid subscription to an online database that we can go in and do searches on basically it's on news stories. We'll do social media at that point. But we don't want to, at least a light covering of social media, because we don't want to bring in somebody that's, that's got some major league problems and put them in the semifinalist pool. However, the next level of review is much deeper. We have another company that we use to do that. We actually pay to have them do a background check. That includes criminal, driving record, credit check, and verification on their academic credentials. So
That's a national check, because a lot of checks are just related to statewide, but.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely.
Okay.
This is a national search. We have to get the candidates' permission. We send them a form. They have to consent to that search. They provide us with their Social Security number. In fact, in order to do an appropriate search, you've got to have that. So, yes, ma'am, that's a very, very important part of what we do, because it has a higher cost. We won't do that on the preliminary phase, but we certainly do it on the finals. So you don't want to bring somebody in that you don't have a good understanding. And all those we think are important. Financial, situations are important. I've lost clients, or candidates on those before. Someone hiring a treasurer one time, or I was helping them with, and, well, they didn't have a good credit record. So do you really want your treasurer not to have a credit record? So bottom line is that the answer is yes, we do 2 phases. The second phase is much more in-depth.
Commissioner Burns, you have any additional questions? Okay, Commissioner Westlake.
I do. I just need a little more clarification on the assessment tool you use for a candidate's soft skills, like communication, problem-solving, conflict resolution. Can you just go in a little bit more depth on that?
Well, there's 22 more. You just named 3 of them. Seriously, and I'm sorry, I should have brought a list to you, and I'd be glad to prepare that and send it to you. I have plenty of material. Those are exactly the type of soft skills that we're looking for. Are they organized? Can they run a project? Are they good with other people? How do they interact? These are all things that we can learn how to do. So soft skills are considered skills in the fact that they can be developed and improved over time. And, you know, it can be a little confusing when you take when you do the benchmarking. You'll be asked questions on these 25 areas. And many people look at that and say, well, gosh, they're all important. And indeed they are. But you really have to sort of stay your hand a little bit when you're filling out that form or survey, because there are some of them that really are more important. And so we try hard to prioritize those. And you're never going to find someone that gets great marks in all of those areas. It's just not natural.
So the way you do that is a survey. They answer questions, and that's how you figure out how they score on these factors.
I would say you're doing the survey to help us understand the soft skills and the level of importance you assign as a composite of those skills. The individuals be given an assessment. So does that distinction make sense? Right. Yes, exactly. Okay. Exactly. It's one instrument. They're really, TTI combines these three different areas into one instrument. You'll get one report with 3 sections. And so you'll have the DISC scores and responses, you'll have the driving forces, you'll have the 25 soft skills. And also, as part of that report, I call it a gap report. It will also quite literally, what it does is compare individual scores to the mean of all the scores in the system, and there's many thousands of people have taken the TTI, for instance, and there's other assessments as well. So they'll be compared to how far they are from the median. And really, then you will have ranked in importance what you see those skills are. We'll see what each one of those candidates is from the median on that set of skills. And so you actually get a color-coded report out that says, in this area, your candidate is green, blue, maybe red sometimes in some areas. So the point is, you'll have a good view before you make the hiring decision. And I want to emphasize, this is really ancillary and helpful to the hiring process. We're looking for fit. Doesn't mean that, you're going to look at that and say, well, this person, they're out of here. Well, I guess conceivably that could happen. But frankly, people at this level, you're probably not going to see that because they've got those skills in the main, or else they wouldn't be in front of you. But still, it's a very helpful instrument. Be happy to send if you'd like to see more information on it prior to the decision, be glad to send you anything you'd like.
And just a point of clarity on that too, one of the things, anytime we participate in the survey creation, we have Wendy get the attorney involved just to make sure that we're not violating any HR laws across the state. So we add that step into it as well. So.
Well, I appreciate and understand the reason for doing that. And this is, psychometrics this one's been validated. It certainly, we'd be glad to supply him or her with any.
Yeah, it's as simple as that. But when you allow us to be subjective about it, we have to have it objectively. That's all.
Good practice and understood.
Yep. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Commissioner Lee?
No, I'm good. Thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you.
I have a couple of clarifications as well as some questions. So with the screening process with the candidates initially, you said was going to be via video, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that is something that you'll, among other things, you'll have that in front of you when it's time for you to review the semifinalists.
So you guys are going to screen them initially via video, and then there's going to be their interview that's done by HireView, which is via video as well, correct?
No, initially we will not do an interview to do the initial screening. The initial screening is based on experience, qualifications, other information they've sent us in the application process.
Okay.
So that's where the semifinalist initial, and we do the online, we call them before we put them in the pool.
What about, like, as far as competencies and work product are considered? Do you typically have somebody show you presentations that they've made in the past? Does anybody do any kind of screening for their communication style? Is there any kind of screening that takes place or an assessment that takes place associated to how they would handle conflict resolution or handle a crucial conversation?
We handle that in a couple of different ways. First of all, that stuff that, as a rule, comes into play toward the end of the process in the final interviews. As I mentioned earlier, we have done assessments, so literally it depends on what the client's desires are, but we actually have done assessments where you'll bring candidates in, give them a scenario, ask them to respond. It's very common in public safety. I'm sure your folks probably do it here in this building. It's probably been done in this room many times. So we have that. We also, we also have a questionnaire that's always standard. We do that. We'll ask you to approve those questions, called a candidate questionnaire. We have done many different things based on what the client's desires are. So we don't automatically ask for writing samples. Well, maybe if they're an attorney or, a profession. But, again, it depends a lot on what we learn at the outset, meeting with you one-on-one, as to what you see the needs are, and number two, what you desire to have in that final package. So we've done all those things. Our standard practice wouldn't include that unless we see the need or desire to do it.
Okay. And then just for clarification, so on page 5 of the RFP, you put some advertisements of where you guys would possibly advertise. But just to clarify from Mayor Pro Tem McMillan's question, so you are going to be doing ICMA, which is a national search, and you outlined as well that you would be doing a regional search. And then just to clarify, too, that you had said that you would also expand it, so we would be reaching out to these and possibly a list of others in order to post the job, correct?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, let me clarify again to say that you will approve the final list.
Okay.
And if you want to add anyone, we'll add them. We find that our list is pretty comprehensive when we finalize it, so I'm not saying you will need to add anyone, but you're certainly welcome to, and that's part of our guarantee to you, is that we do want to make as great as effort as possible. Some of those are national outlets that we think are important. They're networks that sometimes we'll send them an advertisement, and they'll redistribute it. So that's great for us. It's great for them. We'll also advertise with some of those national organizations as well.
And then regarding in the project timeline, if we were to do the community engagement survey, where would that typically fall? Is that typically happening during the 30-day period where the job is posted, or is that happening when we're getting into the screening and assessment period of the semifinal candidates?
Well, you're at the very least. Let me say it this way: you're going to want that to be. First of all, you're setting the schedule, right? You know what your needs are in terms of getting someone in place. And so, optimally, you would have that before you even wrap up the candidate profile.
Okay.
But I will tell you that it's impossible to do that in a time to get it before the candidate profile and the schedule that's contained in that package. So you'd have to open up the schedule and add time to it for that to happen prior to the profile. To stay on that schedule, and I think still get most of what you need out of that survey, because it's going to inform the council, the commissioners. It's going to inform ultimately whoever you choose. But the bottom line is, I think it's a very, very viable instrument if it's done during the search process, not necessarily prior to the development of that profile.
Thank you.
What do you need to know from us?
Well, I
got everything,
I think we're good to go. I'll just say this: let me be very clear. We would love to have this project, love to work with you. We enjoy North Carolina and done, as I said earlier, we've done a lot of work down here. Feel like we've got a pretty good knowledge of the state. We are, as I mentioned earlier, this is a very good time for us, just to get the work done. We've had some times in the past, it's hard in a private company, sometimes hard to say no to work. And so we have at times had maybe, shall I say, sufficient work to keep us fully engaged. And at the moment, this is a good time for us. So I think for a lot of reasons, this would be a very welcome project for us. As you saw in the profile, we've got a team of people. We meet by phone every Monday morning, go over each of our projects. So it's not just me, it's not just the Richmond office. We have a whole group of people in various offices that support all of our activities. So if I get hit by a truck, somebody will be here for you. And that's really, we think, important. And we have had, fortunately, no one's been hit by trucks, but we have had other times when we've had to supplement and bring people in on different projects for different reasons. But the bottom line is we're there for you, and we would be very pleased to have the opportunity.
Well, thank you, and thank you for coming down in the proposal. Our schedule is by next Tuesday, we will make a recommendation or approve the town to enter into a contract with the firm we select. So over the course of the next few days, we will be making a final determination. On the 23rd, Wendy will notify all. So that's when you would hear back from us. So with that, we will take a quick 5-minute recess and allow you to escape. And thank you again for coming down.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank all of you.
Thank you so
for
much.
your courtesy, and your questions are quite excellent. And best of luck with your search. And
Thank you.
hopefully it'll be us doing it. But look forward to hearing back from you.
Thank you. We'll get back together at 11:35 for a quick 5 minutes. Not an emergency meeting, right? Okay, and at that meeting, we can decide to, so Wendy can have the appropriate motions ready for the meeting. So we will have had 3. Whatever your criteria is, well, whatever the criterion, the RFP is pretty clear. Hopefully, we got enough clarity from the 2 today, and we'll be back here at 2:30 on Thursday, correct? All right. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right, we'll adjourn.